Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us this edition of Leak Project. I'm your host, Rex Bear. We have Marshall Masters with us today. And because of the typewriter bug that's going on right now, everybody's at home on the internet. We're having some opportunities getting Marshall on via Zoom. So I've got him on the phone, and he's going to share information with us on the phone. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us this edition of Leak Project. There we go. Oh, man, that's awesome. I stopped it right away. I didn't have an echo that lasted for more than 5 seconds. So there's a lot going on around the world right now, folks. People are just freaking out about what to do. And I can understand if you watch the mainstream news, rightfully so. They're just beautifully creating this magical fear-based mindset. And I'm not saying what's going on isn't happening. I mean, there's definitely things you want to be concerned about. Absolutely. But if you take everything they say per verbatim, you'll probably be insane right now, literally, because they contradict each other on a regular basis. So let's just take a deep breath and put on your gloves, put on your suit, put on your gas mask, whatever you need to do to feel safe. We'll talk about it. And the way I'm looking at it right now is it's like a paid vacation, right? You're at home, you're doing things you should probably be doing anyway. Now you're probably organizing the garage. You're probably, cleaning out some cupboards that haven't been looked at in a while. You're probably selling some stuff online. So I've been making some great trades. I mean, my goodness, like the cryptos and the stocks, this is a trader's dream if you know what you're doing. Now, if you're somebody that's just sitting back going, oh man, what am I going to do? Then yeah, your heart's probably beating 1,000,000 miles an hour. You're probably getting ready to have a stroke. You're probably freaking out. But if you know when to get in and when to get out of these markets, you can be so successful and you can do it out of your own house. Check out tradelikeagenius.com. Use the code MARCH, get up to 45% off non-bundled items. They use proprietary algorithms, nanu, and they're a group of people that trade. They eat, drink, sleep, work out, trading. You can see gains in weeks that it takes some people years to experience. TradeLikeAGenius.com. Give them an opportunity. You're going to love it. And Marshall, thanks for being a guest on Leak Project. How the heck are you?
Hey, I'm good, Rex. And a few days away from getting my latest book out, Win-Win Survival Communities. And in the meantime, like everyone else, following current events with specific regard to what I call the typewriter disease.
Yes. Yeah, let's talk about that.
And, the first problem with the typewriter disease is why are we calling it a typewriter? It has a lot to say about where we are right now. And I have to tell you that in the 90s, right after perestroika and the fall of the Soviet Union, I was in Russia doing business for many years. And my first trip in was in 1992, actually. And I'm seeing really unnerving parallels because in America, we're doing what people were doing in Russia before the fall of the Soviet Union, which we're talking in memes. So we're already if you're talking in memes, you're in a communist country or one that's, on the back slope to hell going there.
It's a corporatocracy that has communist roots.
Yeah. And it's all power and control. What I am seeing is now on my website, and I can't give you the exact title. It would be the blank Planet X Connection article.
We're going to click on that article right now, Marshall.
Okay. And the reason why I did this was I actually have been I'm working on this book right now. It's massive. It's like 130,000 words. It's a total complete business plan for community survivals, communities of 50 to 150 people. And using current technologies and new funding technologies. Earlier you talked about cryptocurrency, for example, which is an ideal way to fund a win-win community through community-based tokens. I digress. We'll come back to that later.
Well, let's come back to that because that's a neat idea.
Yeah, and but what I'm seeing right now is, and in the article, what I'm saying is this is really people. It's difficult to understand what's really happening to us if you're down at the tree line beating your head against tree trunks. Okay. And I mean, it's a great way to embed wood chips in your head, but that's about it. And the thing here is that if you take a huge, huge step back, all right, you see another picture. And what I see is in two directions. I see immediately in front of me, which is what's happening on Earth. And then I see beyond that to what's happening in space and coming towards us. And so the Planet X system is merging. And in my The Blank Planet X Connection article, if you get down to the trifecta from hell.
We're looking at that right now.
Two things happened to me this day. I got, and the interesting thing was, I got two messages together. When that happens, I kind of feel like it's a little hand of God going here. You know, it's like,
yeah.
Hey, Reiki, we're throwing you a phone, fool. Write about it, okay? And
right.
I get one of those things going on. And the first one was from a gal, Isabella. And she's in Europe, and she works with Your Own World Books. She's an editor and a foreign language translator. And she wrote me, and she's, you know, they're terribly, terribly distressed about this over there. And she was asking me, is this a false flag? And I'm getting the same question from Americans, but when I see it coming from Europe, now I know it's time. I got to respond. And then boom, the next email opens up is this fakakada freaking damn picture. That's the best observation photo of Planet X I've seen of the thousands I've looked at over the years. And God knows how many times I've discussed with you, right?
Right.
This is the bada bing, baby. This is the cash cow picture. If you look at this and you go, gee, maybe we ought to wait and see about it, you know, hey, double dumbass on you. Because what do you got here? You got an above the clouds observation at altitude in a commercial airliner. And people say, windows in airliners destroy. No, they don't, because they're made out of plexiglass, which is what you make aquariums with, so that you have very good optics. Okay. And what you're seeing are three objects. And in the article, I do a gamma test to show that they are authentic objects. These are real objects. And not only are they real, but they're covered by the chemtrails in the clouds as well. Look at the chemtrail activity. You know, excuse me, don't tell me this is international air traffic with old Boeing 707s. Okay? Duh.
Oh, come on, dude. Those are just swamp gas ice crystals.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
you know
yeah.
that, man. Come on. Where's your tinfoil hat?
Yeah. You know, there's that, you know.
Looks like a checkerboard up there, Marshall.
Yeah, you know, mix that swamp gas with your favorite intoxicant, you got a whole new high going. But I looked at this thing, and the chemtrail activity is bizarre. I mean, first off, vapor trails follow the airplanes. They don't stay up in the sky from one end of the horizon to the other. Okay. And these things, look at them, they're just hanging. All right. And they have this density to them. This is, you know, I couldn't believe, but let me get to the objects, because this is the first time, very first photo I ever had, not one, not two, but hey, come on down, contestant. Curtain number 3. Okay. We got 3 objects in the gamma test. So this says, hey, we're getting a little closer. And yeah, they're chemtrailing the dickens out of it and doing everything they can to keep us, you know, from seeing it so that we can come to a consensus. But this picture says, clean out the guest room, Bunky. Hell's coming for a damn long stay. All right. So, what has this got to do with our current typewriter disease?
Hey, real quick. And also, after you talk about the typewriter disease, yesterday, Salt Lake City gets hit with a 5.7 earthquake. It was the biggest quake there in decades. And the Wasatch Front is out there. If you ever go to Salt Lake City, you've got over 1 million people in this valley surrounded by mountains. I mean, it's a gorgeous city. I absolutely love Salt Lake.
Yeah.
I hope that, I hope that nothing more comes of that, because there's been many aftershocks.
Yeah, that is a big one. That's really got to be scary.
So some people are wondering if, if there is this planetary object, because I'm looking at this footage right here, and I've seen some pretty compelling footage before where I'm thinking, hey, that's it, that's the ticket. But then somebody shows me how they can duplicate it. This right here, I think it looks like some pretty serious footage. The only thing is, how would we get video? That to me would be the smoking gun, is getting video on top of the photos. Your thoughts on that?
I would love to have video, but what was fortunate was that whoever took this picture had a good camera, had a good smartphone, because it was 2,000 pixels wide, which gives me a real ability to, especially when you look at in the second image where I'm showing the gamma panel step down.
Yeah.
And you can see, that the image really, this is a very tight zoom up. This is magnified several times, and it still holds. So the detail is there. So I would have to be honest with you and say, as a researcher, the still photo to me is more valuable because of this resolution than a video. A video is going to be 72 dots per inch. This is 120 at 2000 DPI. Man, whoever did it had a late model phone. Probably this looks like it's an Apple phone. Apple smartphones are typically better for these observations than Android, because Apple works more in the ultraviolet and infrared ends. So it gives you the visible light spectrum, but it also overlaps into ultraviolet and infrared, which is the reason why these Apple smartphones are, the late model ones, are particularly excellent for observing objects near the sun, which is the most difficult thing to do. And, if you have a telescope and you were doing this with a telescope, it just would be blinding light. Okay. So we have this technology, but the bottom line is, if you look in that gamma panel, we start with an upper left-hand corner, gamma 1.0, and I work it all the way. I step it down, 0.75, 0.5, 0.25, 0.2, 0.15, 0.1, and then I take it from 0.1 to 0.01, all right, which is as low as I can go. And what really stunned me is the object that's at the 8 o'clock position here is, I've been seeing this object at this position, these three objects, I keep seeing these things popping up in the same damn place, have for the last few months. But here, they're all three together. I've seen one or two, but never all three in these exact same positions relative to the sun as in this image. So for me, there are other things that I look at to vet this. In terms of, is there ever going to be the ultimate smoking gun photo that's going to convince everybody? No. People are, the only way you can believe in Planet X without any hesitation is through one of two paths. You follow the science, or you follow what you can observe through your five senses, if you don't trust the science or don't understand the science. So for me, Planet X was game over in 2006 after Ulysses. after NASA announced the Ulysses findings. The Ulysses was a probe that was in a circumpolar orbit around the sun, as opposed to an equatorial orbit. And it gave us a brilliant profile. And of course, as you know, every time with NASA, when their probes start to get to something interesting, they always have these mechanical problems. You know, why is it we give these people billions of dollars, and then their crud always breaks just when things get good, you know?
Right.
Well, that's what happens. But they did release one image from Ulysses, and it was the smoking gun. And the sun is perturbed and interacting with an approaching object that is in the southern skies at that time on an inclined orbit of roughly 30 degrees relative to the ecliptic. And when we saw that, plus all of the other science data that we had from previous to that, we know that was it. The science told us game over. And it's always been that way for me since 2006. Up to 2006, I was going, well, I don't know, you know, we got to be open-minded about it, you know. After Ulysses, no, that was it. Game over, baby. Smoking gun. But then again, I'm a science guy. All right, I've always been driven to the science. For people that aren't driven to the science, you got to see it with your own eyes. And that's the bottom line. And why do I know that? Because I saw this freaking ugly rock with my own eyes on September 9th, 2018. And I was accompanied by a very dear friend who is a retired professional, and she is glow-in-the-dark smart. And the two of us saw exactly the same thing. And the object we saw was the object that you see directly on top of the sun in between the other two, except when we saw it, it was down actually where the object to the right is. It was closer to that proximity to the sun. It was fairly close to the sun, but still separate and behind it. And, you know, it stood out clear as day. And we only had a few seconds to observe it, because when you're looking at an object that's near the sun, you got to wait until it's just right to the horizon for a naked eye observation, because when that happens, you have the atmospheric lensing that is going to make it possible for you to see what is to either side and perhaps behind the sun. And when we look at these three objects, what we're seeing is a daylight side. There's no terminator. All right, a terminator is like the moon, you know, that crescent shape. That terminator is where you go from light to dark. When we start seeing a terminator like moon crescents on these objects, that's when we know they are going to be in front of the sun and not behind it. And they're moving that way. And so looking at this, if, you know, we're always thinking, you know, when are we going to see it? I'm seeing it, been seeing it forever, you know, but hey, that's just me. For everybody else that the doubting Thomases that are like, well, you got to show me a smoking gun because I'm not going to go and do something rash. All right, when they're seeing it, and they're pointing up in the sky going, hey, Phyllis, you ever saw anything like that? No, Harry, let's turn on CNN. You know, when they're doing that, okay, then all the nonsense is over and we know what we're dealing with. And that's going to be coming. So that's within, you know, at least in the coming year, because now when I see three objects, all right, we're merging. And I believe the reason why we see three objects is because Nemesis, which is the brown dwarf at the core of the Planet X system, has finally entered the northern skies. And that means once it's gone up above the ecliptic, all right, the equatorial plane of the sun, if you can think of it that way, once they're above that, then what happens is it's going to start accelerating. This is pure physics. And so when this thing is coming to its point of perihelion, it's going, between now and then, it's going to be accelerating faster and faster. And then it is going to reach a point where it goes into a hypervelocity speed because it's whipping around. And so the time on this is going to compress tremendously as we are now moving forward. So, you know, I first started tracking Planet X, first started getting visible observations in 2013. Okay, in our articles that we tracked, there was a webcam in Turrialba operated by one of the universities down there. And it was a fantastic camera, perfect position, perfect sky. And we were catching it at the time. I called it blue bonnet because it was so tiny. And it was blue. It reminded me of bluebonnet flowers from Texas. That's why I call it blue bonnet. And we started tracking it until the United States government went down there and donated a new camera to the university that no doubt was used in the original Nixon-Kennedy debate. Okay? This thing had about 2 lines of resolution. It was awful. And they put it up there. And the first thing they did was, with the 2 lines of resolution, is they pointed it at the ground. So they knew exactly who we were and how we were reporting. And they actually had to intervene and put a piece of garbage up there and turn it at the ground to shut down our program. So a lot of people followed us back then, but you know, after the end of that, they win, because what do people say? Well, I don't know about that. I don't want to rush to judgment. Okay? So big win for them, big loss for us. But this is the way it goes. Now the question is what is going to, you know, what's happening now? Now, what I am saying is what we have politically is a big game of musical chairs. This is about King of the Hill, folks. That's it. King of the Hill. Whoever, when this freaking Ugly rock starts to really give us hell, okay, it comes around to its point of perihelion and everybody's looking up going, didn't see that before. All right, when that's happening, whoever is in power, when this really onsets, is going to be in power through it and after it. And this flyby is going to be an 8 to 10 year situation of terrible times.
Let me jump in real quick on that. I want to jump in on that note. So the situation that we're dealing with right now, you know, people are certainly changing their habits. They're staying in their house for the most part. I mean, this is something that at least the media is portraying on not only a national scale, but a global scale. The invisible boogeyman has, unless you've got a very powerful microscope, you're not going to see this thing. And people probably aren't going to be able to carry one of those things around with them unless they've got this really incredible technology that's hooked up to a quantum computer that's interfaced with their brain and their neural network. And I'm just being sarcastic right now, but I'm not. Truth and humor.
That was rather good, actually.
I was working with that, right? I was like, maybe they think I'm serious for a minute. I'm doing my best.
Yeah, that was good.
Yeah. Timeshare.
That one, you know, soundbite it.
Yeah. Would you like to buy a timeshare on the moon? So anyway, so yeah. I feel like this is kind of a great way for those that love us so much to figure out what it would take to get people to really change their habits. And maybe this is also something that maybe there's a light at the end of the tunnel here, where it seems to me that some people that I've talked to feel that there's something much bigger on the horizon than what we're being shown right now in the media. And this is a way for people to kind of prepare without being told what's something even worse that could be close and closer than we think. So you are kind of basically saying that this, you feel, could be a way to cover the situation of there being an incoming planet or incoming planets.
Well, it is doing that because what they're trying to do is, we have 2 huge forces butting heads right now. And we have the globalists And then we have the nationalists. The globalists they're not nation state people. They're just simply the world is their sandbox and we're mullet. That's it. Okay. We're just fish. And the globalists have been in power for a long time. Now, the globalists took power in America with the beginning of the Bush dynasty. The first president after Reagan was a globalist. The last president after Reagan, or the first nationalist is Trump. So if you go between Reagan and Trump, everyone in between was a globalist. So this is not a political affiliation. All right. You got the Bush, the Obama, the Clinton families, and they're all into this filth up to their necks. All right. And what's happening is Trump is coming in and he's draining the swamp. And the globalists, if they remain in power, what does it mean to your listeners out there? If the globalists remain in power, or they're able to to defeat Trump and the nationalists or the patriots or whatever you want to call them, but if they're able to defeat this, then they will continue what they've been doing before, which is going to reduce the population of the planet by 95%. Okay? That's it. You got a 5% chance of surviving under someone like a Bush, a Clinton, or an Obama. That's the truth of it. And now you've got a chance to fight for your life. Let me give you one example. In my book, Win-Win Survival Communities, I have one causality that I say, this is the trigger event that you got to worry about. The causality is when the national power grid collapses catastrophically. Now, this was documented in 1 Second After by Fortune, and the book actually has a foreword to it by Newt Gingrich. And that's where he's saying 9 out of 10 Americans die. But I think the globalists, that's not enough for them. They only need 250 million slaves to live in the lap of luxury, and the rest is a waste. So they want to thin our ranks. Remember, Georgia Guidestones says, keep the planet under 500 million humans, but it doesn't tell us how we get there. Well, we know how we get there because the globalists are setting us up to fail so that we die. They're destroying our immune systems with processed food, over-vaccination. Everybody knows mercury is a deadly metal, and we pump it into our kids by the quart. Okay, we're doing all of these things that are going on, and we're having health issues we shouldn't be having as a nation, and it deteriorates our ability to think, to reason, to survive and come together. I don't care if you have a $3,000, okay, with all the greatest gizmos and 10,000 rounds of ammunition. Guess what? You're not going to hit squat with that if you're doing the poo-poo dance because you're sick as hell from something you ate. And a lot of people, one of the big questions I ask people about their survival, I say, have you stockpiled food? Yeah. I've been doing this, mind you, I've been doing this since 2013, okay? And I've been asking people, have you actually tried living on your survival supplies for 2 weeks? Exclusively, anything else. You actually go into survival mode eating what you have stockpiled. And you know what? I don't care if it was Joe Blow with a box of Kraft macaroni and cheese or a wealthy guy putting $1 million bunker into the ground. Nobody tried it. I did. I went to my survival supplies and I lived on them for 2 weeks. Damn near killed myself. Processed food, GMO will kill you. It is death food. It only gets away with it because we mix it with fresh fruits and vegetables. You take fresh fruit out of the equation and you're living on canned and packaged food, you can do that with pure organic food. All right? USDA, or even better yet, something certified EU. That's the gold standard. The USDA organic has loopholes in it for the industry. You could drive an 18-wheeler through. Okay? And they do. But when I was living on the organic food, and guess what? I got most of it at Costco. No problems. A little boring, but no problems. You know, it's a little boring. I like Cholula sauce. A couple of splashes. Hey, there you go. Now I'm doing Kraft macaroni cheese. I'm doing, you know, Chef Boyer, all the kind of stuff that I see people putting in their stockpiles. I started, and what I did was I alternated 1 week organic, 1 week not, 1 week organic, 1 week not. So the non-organic week are the, you know, when I was doing GMO and processed food, I put on weight, got sick as hell, had digestive problems. I mean, I was totally incapacitated by the end of the week. Then I would go on the organic canned and packaged food, and then I would start to recover from that, go back to GMO and processed, and the wonderful world of craft, and boom. By the end of the week, I am either constipated, diarrhea, achy bowels, fuzzy head, all of it. This food will just kill you. And everybody stockpiles it like crazy. Another thing that they do is everybody stockpiles somebody else's ratio. So they're telling you, here's how many sugars, how many carbohydrates, how much protein, whatever. You know what? You get a bucket and it says, you know, a gazillion calories. A lot of that's going to be coming from flavored sugar drinks. You think you're getting a big bang for the buck, you're just buying a half a bucket of sugar. Okay? And you look at the amount of protein, I got news for you. It's minimal, and what's in there probably is not all that digestible either. And so people underestimate their protein demands, are way too dependent on sugars, simple sugars, okay? And processed food, GMO, and they don't, and so I know what I already, you know, I know it. I'm the only person that ever lived on his supplies. And I will tell you what I did with my survival cash. I wouldn't even give it to charity. I took all of it and threw it in the dumpster. And I was over, you know, and that was expensive. But I wasn't going to give that food to anybody else knowing what it had done to me. So for those of you out there who think Kraft macaroni and cheese is the way to go, been there, done that, you won't survive. This is the kind of thinking that you have to have going into this. And so, you know, part of it, it really changed my whole way of thinking about things. And it was in 2015, I was at an Ed Dames in Reno teaching remote viewing, and a very lovely lady, Gloria Tomlinson, she was able to find someone who actually sponsored my tuition, because these are very expensive classes. I found remote viewing was something I'm very, very talented with, and it was a good skill. And I would tell you that remote viewing is an extremely useful survival skill. And you should take the time. And it's also a safe skill. If you're channeling, you're talking to entities, and you don't know if you're dealing with imposters. But when you're doing remote viewing, your brain literally locks up into the Akashic record. So you go to the library, basically. And what you're seeing is what's in the Akashic record. You don't have to worry about being intercepted by imposter entities that want to cause trouble for you. And so that's the reason why I say start with remote viewing, which, by the way, both channeling and remote viewing use the right side of the head, which is an interesting thing. This is where the information comes in. So when I took the class, what happens when you're taking a remote viewing class is Ed will get up there and he'll say, okay, here's your remote viewing assignment. and it'll give you a cryptic number like THZX234, something like that. All right? Like, go figure it out. And what it is it's written on a piece of paper. It's in his briefcase. That's the interesting thing about remote viewing. You go into the briefcase and you find that number. And then you see what's there. And so we did that for 2 days. And the last assignment on the second day, he gave us the code. We remote viewed it. And instead of the other exercises where you're seeing pictures of an amusement park or a battle scene or something like that to describe, Ed said, this last one, this is where you find yourself in the Akashic record when the kill shot happens. Now, the kill shot is what Ed Dames is talking about, what the kill shot really is. And he talked about it actually a lot more in 2004 in a video, which I have, and did a brilliant job of it. And he's been consistent, very good on it. And, the thing here is that when you're doing this, you are having an IMAX experience when you remote view. You're not hearing words or receiving a message or hearing a voice. It is because you're in the Akashic record, it's purely experience and with your 5 senses. So you see, you smell, you hear, you taste, you touch. It's amazing, but that's what happens. And so in that last coordinate, Ed said, you saw yourself when this thing happens, and the sprite is it's cosmic lightning. I mean, if we get hit with a solar sprite, if you're on that side of the earth that gets hit, it's going to be a really bad day. Okay? And if you want to see what a solar sprite can do to a planet, go take a look at Val Marineris on Mars. They tell us the Grand Canyon is the result of water erosion. I'm not on board with that. But I'm not going to talk about that because Val Marineris is a lot bigger than the Grand Canyon. And if you're going to tell me Val Marineris was created with water erosion, I'd like to see your data. Okay? Val Marineris is what it looks like when you get hit with a solar sprite. That is what Ed Dames is talking about. And what he says is that this is going to occur when a large object, a planet several times the size of Earth, passes between Earth and Venus, and we have days of darkness. All of this, he and his team of remote viewers, they have done this, validated it over the years, time and again, they keep seeing the same thing. All right. So, and in the class, there were some people that the news wasn't really good. When Ed said, now, after you saw this, if you, for example, saw a surgical room, you're not going to survive, possibly. But if you see a ship sailing away, that ship has sailed and you're not on it. You ain't going to be there. And so there were people that learned that they had a good chance of dying, that they had no chance of surviving. And then for the rest, you could see where you were going to be when the guacamole hits the fan. Now, I saw myself in what I'm writing about in the book, a win-win survival community, which is based on concrete domes. These are the strongest structures known to man. Now, it costs a few $1,000s to take a course to learn how to make them. You buy the book, it's the next best thing to that course because I walk you through the construction process step by step. So you literally could take and hand it to a contractor and say, this is what I want, and that's where I want it. And the contractor will know what to do. All right, so it is a plan for the common man. But I saw myself in a win-win. I saw myself there with many other people. It was a structure within a structure built into the side of a hill, just as I design it now and show it in my book. And, you know, I was there with a significant other, which to me at the time when I had the remote viewing didn't make sense because I had just gone through a divorce. So all of a sudden I'm seeing myself with a wife in this and I'm going, wow, I just went through a divorce. It was kind of odd. But so I guess the moral of that story is if you see me walking down the aisle again, head for the hills, Bubby, it's game up. But, you know, that's what I saw. And that night, I had a conversation with two other classmates. And we skipped the last presentation and we just started talking. And that's exactly the point. It was, you know, that it launched. Was back in 2013. I think it was on the March. I'd have to go back and look at the date. It's in the article. But that was the day that win-win survival communities took root. And I understood then that when I look at preparing and preparedness, we're doing it all wrong. I'm sorry, but everybody out there that's preparing, you're doing it wrong. And the reason why you're doing it wrong is what you're preparing for. You are preparing to hit a wall. You are preparing for the life as you know it comes to an end. You are looking at crisis mode every day. You are expecting and looking at no continuity of life. In other words, you go into a hole in the ground, you eat dead food, and you fret about whether or not you're going to die when you come up afterward. This is wrong. This is the way that, you know, this is like in California, you know, flashlight batteries and water for 3 days. It's short-sighted and foolish. It's optimistic. Because with something that's going to last up to a decade, and that's what we're going to have, 3 days of flashlight batteries ain't going to cut it, Bubby. You got to have a whole new way of doing it. Instead of hitting the wall, loss of continuity, doubts and uncertainties, with a win-win community, the goal is, while other people are hitting the walls, you're going over speed bumps. And why is that? Because you're already living an all hazards lifestyle. Very quality, beautiful domes. You're going to have good quality of life. It's going to be safe. It's going to be family oriented. You're going to be isolated. We don't need to talk, you know, given typewriter disease, we don't need a long conversation about isolation. You're going to have filtered air, NBC, nuclear, biological, chemical. You don't have to worry about the bugs getting and hitting you. But the whole point of a win-win is you create a continuous lifestyle. So while other people are hitting walls, you're going over speed bumps. While they're eating dead food and pooping their guts out because they didn't test it first, you're eating fresh food every day. And your win-win community is capable of producing tons of fresh food while earthquakes are happening, volcanoes are erupting, and things are falling out of the sky. All hell is going loose. Everyone is just getting the heck beat out of them. And guess what? You're in your win-win producing tons of food every day while people around you are dying. Now, a big thing of the win-win concept is you just don't produce food for yourself. You have to have a viable, self-supporting community. So you have a farming formula, you produce 10 times as much food as you require. So if you have a community of 100 people, you're growing enough food for 1,000 people. What are you doing with that other 900 people to feed? You now, while you're in normal times or typical times, what do you got? You got revenue, baby. Now, for those of you who've been building $1 million bunkers, you know it's going to cost you $1 million for the bunker, and over the course of the lifespan of that structure, you're going to spend twice that for repairs, maintenance, and replenishments. So you got a $3 million investment. And then you have the problem, how in the heck do you get there in time? Okay? What if you're in a commercial shelter? Guess what? The rules of the commercial shelter is when you're here, you're here. You're not here, you're not here. You don't get here when we seal the front door. Tough darts, farmer. That's commercial. You don't know if you're going to get there, and they seal the door. And worse yet, you're not going to know if somebody said, you know, it's not a bad thing to have fewer mouths to feed. Let's just seal the door now and screw everybody else and live twice as long. This is the kind of stuff you're going to have. With a win-win community, first thing about a community, as I say, 1/3 of your membership, a minimum of 1/3 of your membership need to be combat veterans, and first responders, police, fire, sheriff, paramedic. You need people who understand the importance of structure and camaraderie to deal with crisis. And they're the core of your community. And their job is to help the civilians to have a sense of survival camaraderie, not just for the sake of survival. Here's the big thing about it. When I was writing the book and I showed a friend of mine, and I said, here's the technology for growing fresh food underground while everybody else is burning to death, okay, and choking to death, and you're cranking out fresh fruits and vegetables like there's no tomorrow. Why is this? All right, because you have a facility that's designed to do that, and you have people that have a sense of camaraderie, because what's the real plan? The real plan with a win-win is not survival for the sake of survival. That's taking a long walk off a short pier, baby. The whole point of a win-win is that the focus is not on surviving. The focus is on space colonization. You know, President Trump just laid down the gauntlet, baby. We are going back to space. We're heading for Mars. And never in the history of humankind have there been as many independent commercial launch companies, space companies, as there are now. And all of those guys, what are they going to be doing? Once we get through this period of time, which is really terrible, we will survive. And then after that, the human species is going to go, yeah, you know, that physics guy was pretty smart. We better get the heck off the planet and colonize. And so you're going to see people like Boeing, Lockheed, Ariane, so forth, SpaceX. The holy grail of space for them is going to be who's the first one to build a kilometer-long colony ship to go to the stars. And then the next question is, who the hell's going to buy tickets? A win-win community is about surviving what comes and seeing it as a test bed experience to refine space colonization and survival skills. So you're not surviving for the sake of surviving. You're surviving to prove that you can colonize. What's the difference? If you survive for the sake of surviving, what happens? At some point, I don't care what the hell's in your stockpile. You're going to lay your head down at night and you're going to say, God, I'm tired of this misery, this suffering, and this uncertainty. This life is not working out. Please take me in my sleep. Don't let me wake up to this once again. Well, you know, maybe God is going to hear the prayer and you get to take a quick exit. But what if God's going, nah, you got a few more lessons to learn, so you're going to stay incarnated. Then you wake up in the morning and it's another day in hell. The question is how many days do you wake up in hell before you finally say, God, I'm tired of waiting for you. You stick a pistol in your mouth and you blow your brains out and spend the rest of eternity tasting cordite. Now that's the reality of it. What if you're pulling together with others and you're surviving and you're making a difference? Because once the economy's gone, the power's off, you're still producing 10 times as much food as you need. What are you doing with it? You don't stop producing, you shift distribution. Instead of using it to go to market to support your operation, you start supplying it to local charities and food banks. And that's how you protect yourself. Everybody wants to grab their $3,000 assault rifle, go up into the hills, and they say clever things like, if I catch you in my crosshairs, I own you. That's bullshit. You got to have hope for the future. And so if you all of a sudden become maybe even the only source of fresh food in that area where you're located, you are going to be surrounded by people who are going to appreciate you and love you for helping them to fight for their lives. Okay? And so this is my message to the haves. You're going to put $3 million into the ground, and it's you and yours. And the big problem is, Bunky, I know you guys, I've worked with you, and your bunkers are always going to be 500 miles or more away from you. So how do you know when the heck to get there in time? All right? And can you get there in time? So you have all these access issues. With a win-win survival community, it's going to have its own bush planes. And in a win-win survival community, the rule is going to be everyone knows how to operate emergency radios. They're going to be given an emergency radio kit by the church that's running the win-win. And here's the drill. When things happen and you are getting to safety, you're getting to one of the win-win properties, maybe you come to a bridge that's fallen into the river, and that's the only way, there's no other way to get across. Now, if you're in a commercial bunker, what does that mean? They seal the hatch and you're stuck on the other side of the river. With a win-win, you have a radio, you get on the air, multiple win-wins. We're going to use your transmission to triangulate your physical location, and they're going to send a small plane out to get you and bring you home and get you the hell out of there. Why? Because you're one of that family, and that family takes care of its own. So yes, win-win communities are a multi-million-dollar operation, but they are totally doable because they have a viable economic model. And they offer the haves actually a less expensive way to be safer than anything that they can do on their own, because they're surrounding themselves with have-nots who are good people and who will protect their interests. And there is your quid pro quo. There is your brotherhood and your sisterhood of survival. And so this is the whole point of the win-win communities.
So with these win-win communities, right now with the situation we're dealing with, the changes in weather, the extreme cold, the extreme heat, I mean, we're going to get another probably 5-10 inches out here where I'm at, which I'm looking forward to because it hasn't been a real extreme winter. Last year was a really nice winter, but let's talk about certain areas that might be safer than others to do these communities. What are you looking at for places that are more considered safe zones?
Well, what I'm looking for, and first off, what I want to say to your listeners is,
you scared everybody off too, by the way. There's everybody, it's okay. We had like 1,500 people, and then the more you started talking about some of these scenarios, I was like, yeah, people are getting. I'm joking around, but at the same time, let's give them a little sense of hope here now. Let's turn this. Right. Let's give them an opportunity to say, you know what, there is a light at the end of the tunnel here.
There's a light at the end of the tunnel. So yes, I've explained the problem, and I'm throwing it in their face because they're probably seeing things they haven't thought about before. Okay, and that's what's upsetting. That's the problem I see with preparation and planning, is not looking far enough ahead. People just look up to the point of surviving and they don't look beyond. I'm way beyond that. And so The whole point of win-win survival communities is what the subtitle of the book says. You prepare for cooperation, not confrontation. You see, we've been talking about confrontation up to now. Now let's talk about cooperation. And so with the win-win in the book, all right, this book is a large book. It's going to be about 130,000 words. This is going to be an 8 by 10, well over 400 pages. And there's a massive amount of research. I have 5 years of hard research in there that I have gone crisscrossing the country to find this information. And there's a positive model. Once you stop preparing for the end of life as you know it, and you start preparing for the continuity of life as pioneers, you change the whole equation. You change the whole equation. And that's the whole point of it. So when I wrote the book, I wrote it as a business plan for the common man. And a win-win community is there's 3 basic hallmarks to it, 4 of them actually. One is you do it as a church. It's not a commercial, it is a nonprofit. That's the only way you want to do this is as a nonprofit. You have a huge number of advantages, particularly when it comes to planning and permitting. The second thing is the structures that you're using, which are concrete domes, the strongest structures known to man. Go look at the Pantheon in Rome. It's 2,000 years old, okay? And that dome is still standing. Domes are tough. They take a licking, keep on ticking. The third thing is what I call ecotech farming, which the way we farm today is it's all grow to market. And when you're growing to market, fine, you have 2 or 3 crops on your farm, but the bottom line is if you got to live on that and all you're growing is lettuce, you got to eat a lot of lettuce to get a few net calories. So with a win-win, you're not growing to market. You're not letting third parties dictate to you what you put in the ground. With a win-win, you control everything from the very beginning. The first thing a win-win church does when it organizes is it's going to be producing and growing complete diets. It's not going to be growing to market. It's going to be growing a complete diet, 3 square meals a day. And there'll be, in the book, I talk about 2 types of diets, survival and space. And the survival diets are based principally on 18th and 19th century American pioneer with cast iron cooking. This is good, simple, fill you up and keep you going food. But for space, with colonization, meat and potatoes can get pretty boring after a couple of light years, probably.
Right.
So you look at the International Space Station, the ISS has a Mediterranean climate. That's its set points. I use that as a beginning point, so you're going to have principally a Mediterranean diet for your space diet. It's a lighter, more flavorful, more interesting, varied diet where instead of saying, is it meat and potatoes tonight or is it meat and potatoes, you're saying, what do we want to do today, Greek or Italian? All right, and you're growing the food fresh on the colony ship, because that's the whole thing about the farming techniques is that I'm using modern aquaponics and this is what NASA, by the way, that's what they're doing for colonization. So actually in the book, some years back, this concept started with what NASA was doing 10 years ago and with study groups. And so they were looking at how do we feed colonists in space? And I took their cue from that, moved it into the book. It worked perfectly, and I put a few twists on it. And when you're doing this now, you're growing a complete diet. So you get up in the morning and you're having eggs. They're coming from your own kitchen, chickens. In the afternoon, you could be having rabbit and asparagus. And guess what? You raised it right there on your farm or your ranch. And everything you have, you are totally self-sufficient. And then there's other things that people really short sight and they don't plan for the future. And in the book, I put a very heavy emphasis on ranching. With farming, the nice thing about farming is you can science farming. Ranching requires a living culture, particularly horse culture. Now, it's not about, gee, it'd be nice to ride my horsey during the tribulation, okay? Yeah, it will be, all right? And people will do that. But why do you want draft animals? Why do you want mules? Why do you want horses, okay? Because you're going to have fuel and you're going to have equipment, but the more you use it, the faster you're going to expend your supply of fuel. And all mechanical devices have a finite lifespan. So you're burning the candle at both ends. But on the other hand, if you have started, you have a win-win and you have your own horses and mules and whatnot there, you have your own animals there, what happens? Now you're using mules to plow instead of tractors. And that's also, I explain how to do this and how to set it up so that you can have intensive cropping, that you can do that. You could either use a two-wheel walk-behind tractor or a mule. And these are the kind of thinking and planning that goes into it. And eventually, after the disaster, humanity will get on its feet and things will start coming back. It will. And you're going to be able to get there because in a win-win community, you have planned for continuity of life. That's all it's about, is planning for continuity of life. So even if everything around you is going to hell in a handbasket, you get through, you have continuity of life. A good example of this is shipbuilding. Anybody can build a ship that sails on flat seas. It's another thing to build a ship that can get through a typhoon. Okay? And if you get caught in a typhoon and you're in an old paddle wheeler, you ain't built for that. That's prepping. You're bottom up. But you're in a Navy battleship, yeah, you'll take the typhoon. All right, you have continuity. And with the paddle wheeler, you don't. That's the whole word. It's not about survival. It's not about life. It's about continuity. Because if you keep the continuity, you keep your people, and you keep your technology, and you keep things working. And that's the whole point of it. And so it is. It's really, really hard for people when they are confronted with what happens when life as we know it ceases to exist. Because that's when people hit the wall. But in a win-win, you're going over speed bumps. And why? Because you're not preparing for the end of life as you know it. You're preparing to create a clean slate for the next civilization and man's magnificent exploration of space. And it's the whole emphasis of what you're thinking about and where you're going.
You know, I think that the possibility to travel the stars and space, that sounds so wonderful. So much room out there, so many opportunities. And the thing is, the technologies now, even like this one patent specifically, I don't know if you saw it or not, but it was a patent from the, matter of fact, I can find it here in a minute. It was a patent that shows this anti-gravity technology that the Navy applied for, anti-gravity Navy patent. And this thing is so powerful, according to the patent. I'm going to pull this up here and show everybody because it's almost unbelievable the amount of power this thing produces. So let me show this real quick. So to travel the stars, I think this would be how they could do it. So the United States patent, this is from the Navy. You can see a craft being used as an inertial mass reduction device. So basically anti-gravity. And let me zoom in on this a little bit, folks. A craft using an inertial mass reduction device comprised of an inner resonant cavity wall, an outer resonant cavity, and microwave emitter. So you scroll down, you look at the blueprints of it, but this is where it gets interesting right here, chapter 65. Further, if we couple the high frequency of rotation with high vibration harmonic oscillation frequencies in the range of 10 to the 9th to 10 to the 18th power of hertz and above, we can obtain sensitivity values in the range of 10 to the 24th to 10 to the 28th watts per square meter. So what that means is essentially 10 septillion to 10 octillion watts per square meter. That's more power than the sun emits per square meter, like way more. That's essentially enough to move time and space. And this is something you could put in your garage. I mean, this is quadrillions and quadrillions and quadrillions of watts per square meter. So what's a square meter in mass? 3 by 3 essentially, so about 9 feet. So you take something that's about 9 feet mass and you put in quadrillions of watts into that size. It's just unbelievable to think about. And you probably wouldn't need gasoline for this. You probably wouldn't need nuclear technology because this has got enough power to move through time and space. And with this kind of technology, they could traverse through space if we could find a way to block the radiation, in my opinion.
Right.
So what are your thoughts? We're looking at the patent right now. So while we're talking.
First off, oh gosh. Hold on a second.
No problem.
I dropped my phone.
Sure, take your time. That's fine. No problem. I'm going to sip on some super tea here real quick from getthetea.com. Use the code REX or Leak Project, get free shipping. This stuff is amazing, folks. You're going to love it. Your health is so important. Your health is one of the most valuable things because with quality health, you can do so much more than having to worry about how you feel. So keep your health as good as possible, as boosted as possible. And also think good thoughts. The mind over matter is so powerful. Optimism. If you're a pessimist or an optimist, if you're thinking good, healthy thoughts versus negative, what would I say? Dis-ease type thoughts. Just that word, you break that down. Dis-ease, disharmony, frequencies, technologies. They can be used for good or bad. Are you using technologies that are going to cause disillusion in yourself? Or are you going to use technology to create a contribution to your higher self of evolution? Deep Thoughts by Rex Bear. Marshall, you there?
Absolutely.
Right
And
on.
I was enjoying your analysis.
Thank you. Checks in the mail.
Good. I'll cash it too.
Cool. Good, man. Rightfully so. That's what I'm talking about. Yeah.
See, what you've done elegantly in your own way is to find the difference between prepping and win-winning. Prepping is all about fear. You prep for fear. You're afraid of an outcome. With win-win, it's not about fear. It's about hope. And hope is a much more powerful human emotion.
Wanted to thank everybody for being here with us. Make sure to check out Marshall's latest podcasts and information at yowusa.com. He's also an avid author. He's been putting together information on Nibiru and Planet X, the Nemesis, for years. He's also helped put together the Cold Rim Bible, which I have a copy of. Fascinating information. It's a complex book of different scriptures from different times from around the world. Be excellent to each other. I'll leave the link for the Patreon page in the video description box. And be the change you want to see.